what stands out to you about the congressional agenda, things have been going on, or even in the broader economy? And with that, I'll start with Steve. Steve, what developments recently have stood out for you that have maybe been flying under the radar screen?
Well, I don't know how much under the radar it is, but I mean, the big debate going on right now is whether the Fed has successfully contained inflation and carefully engineered a soft landing for the economy. Um, so I guess later this week, the Commerce Department is going to give us a first look at their estimate of the fourth quarter GDP numbers. So as folks may recall, back in the third quarter, GDP growth came in at a real rate of 4.9, almost 5% real GDP growth. And I think most observers are expecting the fourth quarter to come in around 2%, which is, it's nothing to write, certainly not the 5% we saw the quarter before, but it's positive, healthy growth. And of course, I think the Fed actually is meeting, the Federal Reserve Board is meeting, or the Open Market Committee rather, is meeting next week to decide what's next on interest rates. And, the markets have for some time now been expecting them to start cutting interest rates. But the Fed keeps pushing back, saying, no, wait a minute, guys, we haven't yet contained inflation. And I think that's an important thing to sort of reiterate. I mean, June of 2022, CPI inflation was running at around 9%. June of 2023, this past summer, they had got inflation down to 3%. So you made tremendous progress from June of 22 to June of 23. We went from 9 down to 3. But since this summer, inflation seems to be stuck. I mean, the last number I think we got for December was also around 3.5%. So, we're sort of moving sideways on the inflation front, which is the reason the Fed keeps pushing back, saying, we're not ready to cut interest rates because we're not convinced that inflation is under control. And I think this is one of those situations where, we're going to get a test as to, who's right about inflation. I mean, remember way back when the Fed kept saying, well, inflation's transitory and it's going to go away soon. And it really hasn't. And everybody said, well, it's all the fault of the COVID pandemic. We had all these supply chain disruptions, and that was what caused inflation. And, that's, I think, pretty much gone away. And inflation is still sort of stubborn. And, the test here is, as economist Milton Friedman said way back when, that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And we're going to sort of see a test of that, because if you look at what happened with the money supply. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of measures of the money supply. There's what's called M1, M2, M3. There's even a thing that used to be called MZM, which actually the Fed discontinued publishing back in 2021. But anyway, all of those measures of money supply showed that, money went from about 15 trillion before the pandemic, which is, currency, bank deposits, money market funds. And it went up from 15 trillion to 21 trillion. And it's still floating around at about 20 trillion. So there's all kinds of money the Fed has created that's floating around in the banking system. And a lot of people would say, well, you go from 15 trillion to 20 trillion, you're going to get inflation. And we did. But a lot of people are discounting that, saying, well, it wasn't the fault of the Fed and it wasn't all of this money the Fed printed. It was all COVID's fault. It was supply chain disruptions and other things, the war in Ukraine scaring the oil markets. And as we see the economy move forward into this year, though, we're going to find out, did the Fed's money creation, Fed money printing machine really have an effect? And will that effect persist going forward? And, I think only time will tell. But, my sense is until some of that excess bank deposits and reserves get soaked up, either by the Fed, lowering its balance sheet or by other means, I think inflation is going to persist throughout the year, and the Fed's going to be hard pressed to cut interest rates.
Yeah, I think that the markets have been perhaps out ahead of themselves in anticipating those interest rates. But as you say, we'll see. So maybe there'll be a soft landing, and then the wings will fall off the plane or something. I don't know.